extra time.
The kind of the intent in the batting in the 3 completed innings, does that show just what David Warner brings to a batting side? You suspect if he bats 2 hours, the scoreboard's probably going to move a bit more than it has done in these 2 tests. Is that a fair assumption? Do you think he almost brings a fairly unique dynamic to a batting lineup when he's in form?
Oh, he does. He's a world-class player. His strike rate's probably higher than most players around the world, and he can put pressure on opposition bowling attacks. But I don't think we should be narrowing it into, that the batting unit hasn't had the intent. I think the bowling has been dominant in this series so far. And if you look at both teams have really struggled to get the scoreboard rattling along. So for me, that's good planning, good bowling execution. But also the surfaces have lended themselves to slower play. I think you saw in the first test match in Adelaide, the surrounds were a bit softer, so therefore the scoring rates were low. Pink ball tends to not be a fast game. And then this surface in particular here, there was a bit of, not variable bounce, but the players were saying it was a little bit too paced, and there was some spin and bite in the surface day 1 and 2. So I think just combating that, and there hasn't been what we normally assumed to be flat Australian conditions in the first 2 test matches. And I hope, to be fair, that the surface in Sydney lends itself to having, the ball at certain stages being able to dominate the bat. I think that makes for intriguing test match cricket. And I think the series is exactly where we thought it would be. It's going to be a great series, and it's 1-1 at the moment as we trudge on to Sydney.
And Andrew, just on David Warner, obviously everyone's pretty happy with how he's progressing. Would he need to be 100% fit to play, or given his experience and sort of prowess, I suppose, at the top of the order, is it possible that he could come back, at a level to play, but not necessarily being 100%?
Yeah, I think that's a real clear option that he may not be 100% fit. Who is coming off an injury, you never know until you get out there, do you? So look, if he's 95% fit, and that conversation is that he's fit enough to be able to go out there and perform his duties for the team, then I'm sure that'll be a conversation that the coach has with the player. And most times Justin's, pretty open with the players as to, giving them accountability around that. So that'll be a conversation as we narrow into the first ball of the 3rd test. And look, we'll get a good steer on that when he comes into camp on this, for the training on the 2nd and 3rd. And some of you guys will be present there, and I think it'll play out in front of our eyes anyway. Once we get eyes on him, put him through some certain specific sort of tests, if you want to use that word. I think the information will become clear. But he's very optimistic that he should be ready to go, which is great news. And we're really encouraged to have him back, or excited to have him back. I shouldn't say encouraged to have him back. We're excited to have him back, and I'm sure that he's excited to come back into the group as well. There's nothing worse than being injured when you're at the top of your game, as David has been over a period of time.
So if Pucovski and Warner are both cleared to play, is that the way forward for the Australian team for the 3rd test?
Not sure. Can't answer that. That was the discussion leading into the 1st test, wasn't it, around Pucovski and Warner potentially opening. It literally is an option there for the selectors. So is Harrison, Warner. So is Wade and Warner. So there's some options there. And look, if Dave doesn't come up, then what does it look like for us as well? So there's a few moving parts there to work through. And as I said, on the 2nd and 3rd, I think we'll get some real clarity on where everyone is at. And I think that, the earlier the selection panel can make that, or the head coach can make that decision, he'll be looking to make it as early as possible to settle things down as well. So, but that information will come to hand through those training days, I'd imagine.
Just Andrew, from a coach's perspective, when you have 2 guys like Marnus Labuschagne and Steve Smith who kind of obsess over their technique, I've seen you have lots of talks with Marnus as well in the last few days, and they're not looking their best in the middle. Like, how do you deal with it? Is there a case of you asking them to just tone it down a little, maybe in the nets, or just working more with them?
Oh, I think it's part of, like if you looked at Marnus's preparation last year and you looked at Steve's preparation over a period of time, you would suggest that the way that they prepare and the thoroughness that they do it with, holds them in good stead to perform out there in the middle. And I wouldn't be too quick to be judging Steve Smith not looking good in the middle. He hasn't got going yet this series. If you looked at the 4 balls that he faced off the quicks in the first innings in the Boxing Day Test match, he looked pretty solid, and he's looked good in the nets as well. So And Marnus probably the question for me at the moment is, the tactically the way that India have prepared and able to probably control those two players in particular with that sort of leg side theory, so to speak. That's something where I suppose those two players have got to come up with a better method. I don't think it's anything to do technically. And yes, they want to make sure that they're technically in a good space, but it's more about the method now. Technically, they're ready to go. It's about how they want to score their runs and how they're going to combat these tactics from the Indian bowlers and captains. So for me, that's probably more the conversation piece rather than anything technical.
Hit the subscribe option and the bell icon to get all the exclusive sports videos on Extra Time.